Every problem we face in life has one fundamental cause. We place excessive importance on the opinions of others about us. This preoccupation with what others think is the true root of our unhappiness. Today, we dive into the depths of the book, The Courage to be Disliked, written by the Japanese philosopher and psychologist Ichiro Kishimi, in collaboration with the author Fumitake Koga. The authors argue that inner anxiety is inseparable from the external world. They clarify that what is called internal anxiety does not exist independently. Every anxiety we feel is, to some extent, a reflection of the shadows of others. Kishimi and Koga argue that all the problems of life can be solved easily, and that their apparent complexity is merely the result of how we deal with them. According to their perspective, the only thing we need to find happiness is the courage to be disliked. They explain that one should not fear being disliked by others. True freedom does not mean being liked, but being disliked without being affected by it. The issue is not a lack of self-confidence, but the absence of courage. The courage to attain happiness also requires the courage to accept dislike. Once you acquire this courage, your personal relationships will change entirely, and they will become lighter and smoother. In this episode, we will review the key lessons from the book, including the psychology of happiness, why seeking others' approval is a dead end, and what the author's advice is on how to live a truly happy life. Kishimi and Koga's view of the world is based on the belief that every person, regardless of their past, has the ability to be happy. The fundamental difference between happy and unhappy people is their readiness for change. The book is based on the theories of the psychologist Alfred Adler. Adler believes that the self is a unified entity, where the body, mind, emotions, and both conscious and unconscious thoughts work together to achieve a common goal. According to this concept, everything we think, do, or feel is directed toward achieving this goal, even if we are not consciously aware of it. The book is based on the theories of the psychologist Alfred Adler. Adler believes that the self is a unified entity where the body, mind, emotions, and both conscious and unconscious thoughts work together to achieve a common goal. According to this concept, everything we think, do, or feel is directed toward achieving this goal, even if we are not consciously aware of it. From this standpoint, our goals not only define our happiness but also shape our identity. The goal we set for ourselves is what forms our sense of self. Kishimi and Koga expand this concept by saying that Adler does not focus on fixed personality traits but views a person through their lifestyle. According to him, your habits, thoughts, and emotions are the result of a lifestyle choice you made at some point in your life, and you continue to choose it because you believe it is the best way to achieve a specific goal. For example, the authors argue that there is no such thing as an inherently antisocial person. Rather, antisocial behavior is simply a choice and a means of achieving certain goals. They go even further, suggesting that goals not only shape our actions but also generate our emotions. First, we define what we want, and then the emotions arise that help us achieve it. Imagine, for instance, someone who desires a new job but becomes extremely anxious about the interview to the point where they cannot prepare or attend. This person believes that anxiety is the barrier preventing them from getting the job. But Kishimi and Koga explain that the true goal of this person is to avoid the interview. Hence, they create feelings of fear to achieve that goal. They don't genuinely want the job but want to avoid the risk of failing the interview, and fear serves them in that. The authors also address the claim that past traumas prevent people from achieving happiness. They counter this by asserting that trauma is not necessarily destiny. Just because someone has experienced a painful event does not mean they are forever stuck in it. For example, negative childhood experiences might influence one's goals, but the final decision about the goals they pursue and how to achieve them belongs to the individual. In the book, they assert that there is no experience in itself that is the cause of our success or failure. Rather, it is how we assign meaning to it. We do not suffer because of the experience itself, but because of what we make of it. We are not defined by our past, but by the meaning we project onto it. They emphasize that regardless of what has happened in your life up until now, It should not affect the way you choose to live from this point onward. You have control over your present, and you decide your future. But if happiness is within our control, why would anyone choose unhappiness? Kishimi and Koga propose that unhappiness in some cases is a strategy used by some to achieve their goals. As we mentioned earlier, goals create emotions. While occasional feelings of sadness or frustration are natural, people who live in chronic unhappiness often have a persistent, unfulfilling goal, usually related to their relationships with others. This is a pivotal point, as the authors believe that a person's overall happiness greatly depends on the goals they set for their relationships. In other words, what are you trying to achieve through your interactions with others? This answer determines your happiness, because your emotions and sense of self stem from your goals, and the most influential goal in your happiness is the one related to your human connections. Kishimi and Koga distinguish between two main goals: seeking others' approval or having a positive impact on their lives. They emphasize that unhappy people often make gaining others' approval their primary goal. They believe that their happiness depends on being seen by others as good people, whether by a teacher, a parent, or society as a whole. However, this perspective always leads to one outcome: unhappiness. Unhappy people believe that the love of others makes them worthy of respect. Some may argue that seeking approval is natural, but the authors believe this is a misunderstanding. People do not seek approval to be happy. They feel happy when they gain approval, because it satisfies a deeper need within them. So why do people strive so hard for others' recognition? According to Kishimi and Koga, this is often due to the influence of a reward and punishment-based upbringing. However, even when unhappy people succeed in gaining others' approval, they pay a heavy price. In exchange for this validation, they live their lives according to others' expectations, forcing them to sacrifice their freedom and, ultimately, their happiness. They live in constant anxiety, measuring others' feelings and acting according to their expectations. It is an externally directed life, devoid of freedom. The reason: they do not want to be disliked. As long as one fears others' judgments, they will never be able to live life in their own way. Praise, in its essence, is simply someone else's judgment that what you did is good. If your goal is to seek praise, you will have to conform to others' standards, thereby sacrificing your own. We have explained how seeking others' approval does not lead to true satisfaction. But that is not the worst part. The worst part, according to Kishimi and Koga, is that this goal is often impossible to achieve because it depends on expectations you cannot control. Sometimes, no matter what you do, you cannot make others like you. And when this goal becomes unattainable, some people resort to an alternative goal: to stop trying. They stop trying to gain approval and create negative feelings to justify their withdrawal, such as fear or self-hatred. But the truth is, they haven't given up on this goal. They have become even more attached to it, deepening their sense of failure and unhappiness. They may end up adopting the idea that there is something wrong with them, making gaining others' approval impossible. This belief protects them from the pain of rejection, but keeps them trapped in unhappiness and indifference, making them think they are incapable of change. Worse still, the pursuit of external approval not only affects their self-esteem, but weakens their ability to form healthy relationships. Why? Because they view life as a competition, seeing others as opponents. If someone else succeeds, they feel like failures. This turns life into a race between winners and losers. And when external approval becomes the benchmark, these individuals fear others' success, and sometimes even celebrate their failure, preventing them from building genuine relationships based on mutual support. Once a person frees themselves from the idea of competition, the need for victory disappears, and they begin to form relationships based on maturity, trust, and respect. Because unhappy people spend their lives trying to meet others' expectations, they feel resentment when others do not appreciate these sacrifices. This leads to a subtle feeling that they are entitled to something in return for what they have given, making their relationships conditional and unhealthy. They believe that if they sacrifice for someone, that person should repay them. But when that does not happen, they feel betrayed, leading to tension or even complete breakage in relationships. According to Kishimi and Koga, this dynamic of conditional sacrifice does not stem from true love, but from a desire for approval and recognition. Over time, this pattern becomes a habitual behavior that destroys relationships more than it builds them. Eventually, this dynamic creates a constant feeling of disappointment and loss of trust, not just in others, but in oneself as well. On the other hand, Kishimi and Koga offer a different view of relationships. They believe that healthy relationships are based on cooperation and mutual contribution, not on competition or sacrifice bound by reciprocation. Relationships, in their perspective, should not be built on attempts to prove oneself or meet others' expectations, but on a sincere desire to positively influence the life of the other without expecting anything in return. Through this perspective, the authors explain that true freedom begins when one decides to live according to their own values, not according to the standards of others. This decision requires great courage because liberation from societal expectations means not only rejecting others' approval, but accepting the possibility of being disliked by some. This is what they mean by the courage to be disliked. To choose your personal path even if it does not please everyone. To live honestly with yourself even if you face criticism or rejection. It is not a call to rebel for the sake of rebellion, but a call to free yourself from the chronic need for approval. That limits our freedom and prevents us from being truly ourselves. In conclusion, Kishimi and Koga emphasize that happiness is not a